You know, despite my channel literally just starting out a couple months ago and my upload schedule being about as dysfunctional as Stephen Hawking playing charades, it's actually been pretty hard to think of games to review without having a pure creative burnout midway through. And at this point, what do I have to show for it? A few filler videos and more depression and anxiety than Bill Cosby has loose ends. So instead of just jumping into another game I might want to review later, I took a giant step back and analyzed my options. I want my next topic to be something that I really care passionately about. Preferably something that my body harbors a considerable amount of vitriol for, so I can be overly cynical and make exceedingly violent jokes that would otherwise land me somewhere in a psychiatric ward. But I can't make a video on any games in my library. Most of them are indie games that I really enjoy on a personal level. And a lot of the worst games in my library are soulless cash grabs that have no enjoyment or creativity involved in their inception, with their only purpose being to make money for their creators and further send the games industry down this ever-spiraling rabbit hole of mediocrity that will inevitably become infested with these bottom-feeding cunts that I wish I could... Okay, I found my topic. I'm sure it's no surprise for anyone to hear that I'm a massive advocate for gaming as an art form. And that title comes with a pretty dense number of two key things: opinions on where the games industry is at right now and reasons for why the average person would never want to have sex with me. For this video, I want to tackle a good couple things from column A, as you've heard enough about my left hand for one lifetime, and I'm not too keen on the PTSD flashbacks I'll get from the female interactions I've had in my life. One of the biggest things about the games industry that I'm forced to think about every time a AAA game comes tumbling into the limelight with fireworks shows and massive launch parties, only to obtain 30 copy-paste reviews from game journalists saying, "It's alright," is how AAA gaming is largely in this endless loop of lackluster releases devoid of any passion or creativity. For this video, I've laid out a couple good examples for both ends of the stick in terms of creativity. So instead of dicking around talking about how I don't have the talent to write about any game in my dense as fuck Steam library, let's get to a game that perfectly encapsulates a large portion of the AAA games that have been coming out as of late. Borderlands 3 is an FPS RPG developed by Gearbox Entertainment and published by 2K, a company that is no stranger to soulless cash grabs. Don't believe me? Just Google their fucking name. Now, I never got into the Borderlands series due to very lackluster gameplay early on, and the story and writing that was just a bit too far along the spectrum even for my tastes. Though I did respect 1 and 2, and Handsome Jack is one hell of an antagonist. 3 came along, and I never would have played it had it not been for all of my friends being as disgustingly masochistic as you would expect from anyone friends with me. So I decided to indulge them as soon as it went on sale. In honesty, I actually quite enjoyed my time with Borderlands 3. As its gameplay was significantly increased from the others in the series, and I managed to navigate myself towards the mute button for my solo playthrough, so I never had to listen to the tumor-inducing nightmare that was the game's dialogue.
Sup?
Stop! Every single line I tuned into in this entire fucking experience is so random XD and relatable to gamers that I would physically recoil whenever I looked down at the subtitles I enabled in case my syndrome ever went down enough to give this game the benefit of the doubt.
It's stealth time! Stealth time! I'm gonna walk over here and go turn! And I'm gonna go over here super duper quiet! Tiptoeing over here, gonna spin around. I'm so quiet, so super duper duper quiet. Oh, that was a bit too loud. Don't slide.
My dad's beatings are more pleasant than this. All of these factors considered, and I don't really need to make a full review of the game to express to people that it was just okay. It held my interest to the end credits, and I don't feel as though my money was wasted, but in the passage of time I'll absolutely forget this experience. Sure, the game is fun to play with friends, and the gameplay feels much more fluid and fun to toy around with, but this experience doesn't feel unique in any way. And the game itself doesn't feel as though it was made because someone had an idea. It feels as though someone's wallet was a bit too light for their liking, so they called their friends over at Discord's PR team and decided to start writing. This isn't a bad thing on its own, but this game feeds into a larger issue. A game no longer needs to wow its audience or defy expectations to sell well. It just needs to have a pretty alright gameplay loop and a couple months worth of staying power. By that point, it doesn't matter if it's left in the dust because the money's already been made and you can always expand with a sequel or reboot. Sequels in general are prone to suffer from these issues, as it's super easy for an executive to look at the success of a game and say, yeah, just do that again. However, sequels can absolutely be put into the right hands and make a very fulfilling conclusion to a story. For this, let's take a look at Dark Souls 3 again. Now, I don't want to send mixed messages here because I'm very much aware that the only reason Dark Souls 3 was made was because Bandai Namco didn't want the series to die. However, Miyazaki wasted no energy in putting an absolute cavalcade of thought and care into this project. The game seemed to exist to be the most solid example of a Souls title, with super intense boss fights, massive sprawling areas, and a somber conclusion that maintains a genuine amount of respect for the other games in the series. At the end of the day, though, sequels like Dark Souls 3 are in a vast minority to the CODs, Assassin's Creeds, and Far Cry's in the room, and are also the least successful. Dark Souls 3 having sold 1.5 million copies in its first month, compared to Far Cry 5 selling 5 million in its first week. This is largely because casual audiences are entering the gaming community more and more devoted gaming audiences are tasked with finding actual passion projects elsewhere, which is my theory for why indie games have been steadily rising as of late. Why sit in your AAA corner trying to pick lumps of gold out of a pile of shit when you can go across the hall and indulge yourself into an indie experience, where there's even more shit, but at least the gold is prominently featured in the center of the room like a redneck Fort Knox. I'd take door number 2 in a nanosecond because I'd prefer not to get feces in my fingernails, and I wouldn't be caught dead playing another boring, gritty Battlefield game when I could be playing A Hat in Time. A 3D platformer with new ideas and style out the ass, with platforming that feels incredibly reliant on movement and speed. Playing this game has been more fun than any Ubisoft or Activision game I've ever touched. But games with the same amount of creativity as A Hat in Time rarely get recognized for their artistic elements because of the way publishers have found to game the system with their annual live service microtransaction-riddled dumpster fires. You still get AAA games that have care put into them, but what's the fucking point if all that time, money, and energy is going to be spent to be dramatically outsold by a yearly sports game? Some games exist on a very weird plane of existence, where their creators seem to get more and more scummy as the game gets more popular and they begin to bend themselves backwards in order to appeal to the lowest common denominator. There are 2 examples of these, but on completely different spectrums, the first of which is Yooka-Laylee, building up a Kickstarter so rapidly that they didn't even need to try on the game. They already made their money and people were going to buy it no matter what because of their nostalgia for classic platformers. Thank fuck A Hat in Time came out to at least deliver on the promise Yooka-Laylee didn't really need to accomplish by that point. The second being Overwatch, a game that I'm sure people cared about making in the beginning when it had an interesting story build-up and a lot of focus on fine-tuning each hero to be the best they could possibly be, only to give up entirely when they found out that there was no way to appease everyone in the community because every character on the roster was broken by design depending on who you asked, and the meta was never good enough. I think the point Overwatch took a turn for the worse was when Dive was so unceremoniously chucked out the window because a couple people said that it had been there for too long. For all of you who don't understand Overwatch terms from 2018, let me take a step back to explain myself so I don't seem as though I'm trying to give a sermon in unitology. At the beginning of 2018, the most powerful team composition in Overwatch was referred to as Dive Meta, a composition usually comprised of D.Va, Winston, Genji, Tracer, Lucio, and either Zenyatta or Mercy. The overall point of Dive was to single out specific targets using movement and crowd control in order to pick off key characters on the enemy team. This meta was fun at the time because it relied on mechanical skill, positioning, proper coordination, communication, and probably a couple lightning bolts, but I never got too hard into competitive. At the time, though, people criticized the meta for a few reasons. This had been the meta for a long time. Higher tiers were essentially only expected to play these heroes. Certain heroes were fucked hard by this composition and were rendered unplayable. My dad keeps beating me for picking Sombra, please help. And Overwatch's solution to this problem was to create a hero that hard countered every character that was even remotely related to Dive, and also every tank in the game. Long story short, Overwatch took a much larger issue with the game's design due to them backing themselves into a corner that people wanted to move a bit out of, and decided the best way to fix it was with a single hero. I could go on, but I doubt anyone here wants to see a 30-minute video of me talking about the shitty decisions Blizzard has made, and it'll be pretty soul-crushing to finish uploading this and find out that in the time it took for me to edit and post this, they've already made enough more for another full video. But what's my overall point here? I guess I made this because of internal frustration with the way the games industry operates, because this is a medium I grew up with and want to keep as a constant in my life. So many games put in so much thought and care to make the experience worth your while, only to be proven useless as a means of monetary gain by the studios that don't have to try anymore. And it's not like I can do anything to change it. The people who buy NBA 2K, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and all the others don't really care about games as an art form. Not that it's bad to not care, some people just aren't as interested. But part of me still wishes developers with genuine talent and creativity were more valued than they are at the moment. Though, knowing me, as soon as From Software becomes one of the most well-known names in gaming, I'll have likely found another indie studio exactly like them and parade them around as the saving grace of video games instead. Hey, how's it going? Thanks a shitload for listening to whatever the fuck this is and, giving the view. I want to quick thank Brighter Than 1,000 Suns for letting me use their song Busy Signal. That song fucking slaps, and so do most of the songs in their arsenal, so go check that, please, genuinely. I really like a lot of the small bands that I bring along to the channel just because I like featuring small creators because I am one myself. So it's kind of like, people helping each other out, and it's really cool. And a lot of them are super nice and are really cool with letting me use these songs, so giving them as much support as possible would genuinely mean a lot to me. So other than that, I really appreciate the view, and I'll see you guys next time.